Delighted to welcome everyone formally to our webinar today, our second one in our online conference, The Role of Chatbots in the Contact Centre. I'm Rachel and I'll be your webinar chairperson today. Delighted to be joined by two industry experts. So to Neil Martin from The First Word, welcome back. Great to have you on another webinar with us.
Great, thanks very much, Rachel. It's really good to be here again.
Brilliant. And if you'd like to introduce The First Word to the people who haven't been on some of our webinars before.
Sure, will do. Yep. Our mission at The First Word is to banish blah, bull and bunkum from business writing. And we do that in the contact center by helping agents to write like real people and not like robots, like our friend, our little mascot behind me here. Don't worry, he's not real. He's not going to, eat me or something. He's just our mascot today. Yeah, so that's our mission. We do that. We help agents through things like training and coaching and quality assessments. And although I'm going to be talking about chatbots today and how you get the language right with chatbots, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about actually apply to us human beings when we're writing to customers as well.
Brilliant. We look forward to it. And delighted to welcome to his first webinar with us, Mashoud Ahmed from Puzzle. Brilliant to have you on board today.
Thank you very much. And it is a genuine pleasure to actually be participating in this. So yeah, it is my first time and I hope there will be many more to come.
Brilliant, I'm sure so. And for people who don't know who Puzzle is, great to have an introduction to them.
Absolutely. So Puzzle is, in a nutshell, a cloud-based contact center provider. And so when we say contact center, we're talking about the full omni-channel, so all of the channels. In addition, maybe in short to add, things that go with the contact center, so things like WFO, things like, of course, chatbots, what we're talking about today. So everything and anything around the contact center, so technologically, as well as the tooling necessary, that is what we focus on. And I, by the way, myself represent the innovations team within Puzzle. So we have a dedicated innovations department in Puzzle.
Brilliant. Well, I look forward to your presentation shortly. So just to let everyone know, we are taking a recording of today's webinar. It will be available later on this afternoon on callcenterhelper.com/recorded-webinars. And just to let you know, we are running our chat room alongside us today. It is available on callcenterhelper.com/chat. There's an added bonus of being in the chat room that you can download a copy of both our speaker slides on the link above. It is in a separate window, but it's always worth following in the conversation. And also, by being in the chat room, you have the added advantage of being able to win a bottle of champagne or box of chocolates, or even an Amazon gift voucher for sharing the best tip. Use #question to ask a question of the two panelists, or #tip to share your top tips. So before we begin the presentations, I'd just like to ask a poll, which is which channel gives the least customer effort? Human advisors, outsourced advisors, self-service, chatbots, or a combination of all? So let me just launch this one. There we go. So Neil, what are your thoughts for kind of the channel that is the least effort for customers?
It's a tricky one.
I'm not going to hold you to
probably
it.
Probably a combination. Yeah, a combination of all of them. I think because that way you can tailor the help that you're giving to your customers, because they'll want anything from an easy self-service request to something that's much more sensitive. So I'd go for a combination of all there.
I think
and
you
thank
always
you everyone else. I could just
So 53%
yeah.
agree with you, a combination of all. 18% say self-service, 16% say human advisors, 12% say chatbots, and 1% say outsourced advisors. Mashoud, was that something you were expecting?
I think so, and I think it's it's definitely contextual, right? So really depending on the kind of interaction we're talking about, different channels are appropriate for different things. So when we talk about effort, one would expect where, you know, something actually ultimately does require a human being. If I then have to go through some other means to get to a human being, it's not least effort. So this is really, this is, I think, absolutely fair, and this is what we expect.
Brilliant. Well, I think it's a great time now to hand over to you, Mashoud, to go through your presentation. So I'm going to hand over the baton to you to run through your ideas for the role of chatbots in the contact center.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. So I will just open up my screen over here. There we go.
Yep, we can see it.
Yep, perfect. Okay, so where do we start? Well, let's start with, of course, what we're talking about, and that is the role of chatbots in the contact center. Now, I want to, for us to actually set the scene a little bit by saying that understanding the capability that we have access to with artificial intelligence, as we hear about, and machine learning advancements that are being made, I think it leads us towards finding quite useful solutions to daily problems. So at the foundation, I think natural language understanding by machines is something that is quite a key contributor in defining the role of chatbots within the contact center space. And the reason that is directly relevant for the contact center space is because we are, in essence, dealing with human conversations, human interactions on a daily basis. And in its very essence, it requires understanding of natural language in whatever channel that we'd like to talk about. So to try to understand this role of chatbots, I think we need to look at what it is that we're actually trying to solve. So some of the questions that we might actually ask ourselves on why we would, and these are questions that you potentially have seen or have yourself come up with on the kinds of problems we're actually trying to solve. So these are just some of the bullets to get us to think a little bit, and I will just go through these very, very quickly to say that, of course, human beings are expensive resources. But I think just the questions earlier or comments relating to self-service and would customers prefer self-service, is that something that is potentially enabled by something like chatbots? Absolutely, because end users, as I stated earlier on, do definitely want where it's appropriate to be able to serve themselves. So if it's not a complex matter, if it's something as simple as making a subscription, ordering something, or whatever it might be, we want that ability to be able to self-serve. Now, in addition, I think if we look at the contact centers and the pressures on contact centers, it is increasingly a complex environment. The kinds of services that we provide, the kind of customer service, therefore, that we have to provide, and the volume of things that we provide with finite resources, we are getting pressured to become more and more efficient. So that's something else potentially is something that we want to solve using this alternative mechanisms. And the other thing, I think that comes with the territory of self-service, really, and that is the ability to get that customer service as and when you need it 24/7. So we want this service to be available and accessible. And I think the other thing is that I don't think any of us really enjoy waiting around to get an answer or something. So what could all this ultimately be represented as? I think, and this is of course an opinion, is that I think what we're looking for here is a simplified, intelligent self-service, but with the caveat that a human being should be at close hand if and when needed. Because in the cases when a human being is needed, we absolutely have to make sure that that happens quickly and efficiently. So with that, I think we need to look at how this service might be actually offered. So I'm going to apologize ahead because it'll be quite a bit of a picture that I'm building up, but I promise after this slide it'll get a little bit easier. So I think to just set the scene here, what we're talking about is we have our contact center and we have these entities, these platforms, these frameworks that are offering us artificial intelligence, that are offering us this ability to do self-service. So I want to build up this picture by saying that the capability offered for self-service is ultimately from these bot frameworks that you see on the right-hand side. And these are essentially external to our contact centers. Now, there are many, many frameworks out there. Some may be better at some things than others. And you may want to actually think about scenarios where it's such an evolving space that, you know, in a year's time, you might want to try out something different. And this area is, as I say, evolving very, very quickly. New capabilities are coming out. So having a situation where you can interchange or swap out these kinds of end frameworks, I think is something that one should think about. Now, on the other side, we have our people, we have our advisors, if you like, in the contact center, who of course must be close by as and when needed. And to bridge the two worlds together, you definitely need this layer in between, what I'm terming here as a conversational platform. But think of this as a middle layer that is doing a couple of things for us. That is firstly facilitating the ability to hand over to the world of the human when needed. It is giving us the ability to integrate to some backend processes or systems to actually enable the self-service part. And finally, this is a good place also to be able to actually look at our business intelligence or reports and things that we want to run, to check on efficiency, to check on how well we're doing. So the picture I'm building for you is to really showcase to you that in a nutshell, this is sort of what we should be looking for if we are not already. And this is the world, a suggested world, at least from Puzzle's point of view, the world we should be in. When we talk about chatbots, in what position? So physically seeing it in a map, I think puts a bit more context. And I've just kind of tried to highlight a couple of things here by saying that what this model actually gives us. Of course, when we have self-service and we've highlighted a couple of questions, what is the problem that we are trying to solve? Well, the fact that when we deploy something like this, it's able to answer 24/7, it's able to integrate to some existing business logic to allow those kinds of automations, etc. And ultimately, the intention is that it frees up time for the human agents, even when it's handed over to a human agent when needed. So if we summarize then, and I did promise we'll go to simpler pictures, if we summarize that, the world of today, what we are saying is that this self-service is offered through these external instances of artificial intelligent machines that are trained to answer specific questions or specific scoped areas to enable customers to get that self-service, or in the case where a handover is needed, to potentially facilitate collecting of the necessary information so that when it's handed over to the contact center, you've essentially saved a bit of time. So catering, I think, for textual channels, and I think a comment was earlier made about the kinds of channels where this is relevant for. Well, of course, any textual channels that we have available by default is possible for these kinds of bots to be able to offer self-service on. But I think what's interesting is that with the availability of speech to text and text to speech, it's actually very possible today to have a situation where you can offer the same kind of service, slightly, of course, tweaked, but over the voice channel. And that's absolutely a possibility today. So that said, I want us to maybe spend just a couple of seconds thinking about the other things that are happening in addition to what we've already got, or what I'm suggesting that's already a possibility today. So as I say, this area is quite dynamic. There's a lot of development happening, and a lot of progress, I think, has been made by some innovative providers out there. And of course, we'd like to consider Puzzle as one of those innovators in this space. And just as a comment, just a few days back, last week at the Call and Contact Center Expo in London, a lot of discussions, a lot of presentations talking about something new, and this has already been alluded to by some people. But what we're talking about is potentially a new kind of role for chatbot and AI. So companies like Google, for example, are actively helping contact center service providers to shape this new model. Well, so what does this model actually look like? Well, the trend that we are seeing is that with all of these channels that are available to us, rather than the bot or the AI that is powering these things, rather than it being directly customer facing, it's almost as if it's taking a back seat. So the interface is not directly with the bot, but rather it's sitting side by side with an agent now instead. And what it's actually doing is it's essentially assisting the agent. And so I think the word that you will see floating around, and it's already been mentioned once, this is becoming more of a commonplace right now. So of course, some have already proposed in the ways that it's supposed to work, but ultimately what we're talking about is that this new trend is showing us that these chatbots are able to, in this model, proactively augment the capability that the human already has. And the effect of that is that you don't necessarily lose on the customer experience because that human to human touch is maintained, but everything that the AI brings is now available. So you don't lose much from the human, but you gain everything from the capability of the chatbots. And of course, because the context in which it's actually sitting, pretty much, again, all channels are in fact in scope for this new model. So just looking at it, how this model works, well, we are talking about, of course, assisted customer service. And on the right of the picture here, if I quickly just point out to you that what it's doing is, in this model, the conversation is being listened to by the bot, be it a textual channel or a voice channel. And what the bot is doing, it's very good at identifying the intent of what somebody's saying or analyzing the text, and is able to use that to give us suggestions and guidance on how to proceed. And that might, of course, include things like, quick actions, some automated tasks, for example, the ability for the agent to see contextual things to be able to directly resolve the customer query. So it's, in essence, it's definitely saving us time in handling that interaction. But some of the, I think, interesting side effects of that is that when you have clear, concise information presented to the contact center agents, perhaps it is an effect of reducing agent training times. So in Puzzle, we see, I think, a picture that is a little bit more, I would say, nuanced than what some have already proposed. Now, we think that this next generation of agent assist is a little bit more than just suggesting answers, which is what we've actually seen out there. What we think is likely to happen is that these agent assist products or layers are definitely able to look at related interactions. So by looking at what is being talked about, bring out other interactions within the business, for example, where similar things are being talked about, thereby empowering the agents, specifically bringing out historical interactions specifically for that customers. We are now talking about the 360 view of the customers, combining some of those many concepts that we've seen in the contact center being talked about. But with this model, it's all possible to put it all together. And ultimately, I think to then imagine a world where workflow automations can also be done. For example, a single click by the human in this case, because the artificial agent here, the agent assist layer is telling you that these are the most likely actions that are possible or you should take. And then it's up to, of course, the individual to decide, the human to decide which actions to take. But this, I think, is very much the direction we are heading in. So I think with that, I'd probably say thank you very much for listening to me. And of course, if there are wishes from anybody to delve a little bit deeper into specifically what Puzzle is doing in this area, more than happy to receive contacts from you, of course, to have questions now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And actually, before we get into the questions, we're going to ask a poll, which is, would you like to see a demonstration of some of the things Mashoud has been talking through? So I'll just put that up online. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mashoud. I really enjoyed hearing what is currently happening with chatbots and kind of the next innovations that are happening, especially the agent assist side of that. You know, it's not just about chatbots taking over, it's actually about sitting alongside the agent and how they can provide that assistance for customer service. So I'm going to close that now. And yeah, so we'll go on to our top tips and questions. The chat room has been a hive of activity, so we'll see what's been coming through. So a question from Dennis, which is, do customers typically prefer chatbots that present as more human-like, or do they tend to prefer chatbots that are very clearly bots? Neil, I know that you're coming on to this in a bit. Without giving too much away, what would you suggest?
I think that we all like chatbots that are human-like, but a bit like when you go to the theatre, we need to know that that's what we're interacting with. We're happy to suspend our disbelief. So if we really want to know that we're interacting with a bot, but once we know that, we prefer it to be human-like, which sounds like a bit of a contradiction. But I think, you know, if we want to know it's a chatbot, and then we want to feel like we're interacting with a human. So yeah, that's my take on it.
So Neris has sent in a tip saying, give your virtual agents, chatbots, a job description. I heard this from someone else, but it makes sense. Mashoud, what are your thoughts on this one?
Oh, this looks really fun to me. But I think absolutely, and I agree with Neil. I think when we want that interaction, of course, knowing what it is ultimately makes it, of course, much more clear and what to expect. So it sets some expectations. But then it's something about us human beings, you know, we definitely relate to something that perhaps has a character or a name or what have you. So the job description, for me, I think definitely is a good idea, and it kind of sets the bounds very clearly as to what it's supposed to be doing. And I think that's a really, really good idea.
Yeah, Neil, you were agreeing with it as well.
Definitely, I think when Mashoud said it sets the kind of boundaries of what a chatbot can do, I think that's really important. And thinking about it like a job description actually helps to humanize the chatbot and helps you to imagine that if we were to employ someone to do this job, you know, what would we be asking this person, in inverted commas, to do? And I think that's a great way of defining what they should and shouldn't be doing.
Brilliant. So we've had a question from Paddy saying, if chatbots handle the simplest tasks, will staff numbers be reduced, or will staff be kept busy by more complex issues? Mashoud, what are your thoughts on this?
It's I mean, this is I guess one of those questions really. It's quite difficult to, in fact, absolutely be certain about any of this. But one thing we do know is that when we free up our people, clearly they're from the mundane, that is, so from the mundane tasks, if we free them up, of course they're able then to actually use their talents and the skill sets that they have to put those energy or put that energy into something that is more complex. And in fact, until you actually deploy a chatbot, you probably don't really know how much of the complex ones you're actually missing out on. So if your goal is, for example, to reduce, the volume of contact that the human beings do, I think by the necessity of the fact that the simple tasks are taken away, the humans are then, inadvertently having to deal with the more complex.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
Thank you. So Craig's got an opinion saying chatbots will scale and let you answer simpler questions, but when handing over to a human agent, the screen pop should appear in advance of the voice call. Customers are irritated by an agent needing to read through that dialogue midway through their conversation. So Dale sent in a tip saying, the key for me is not to start outside the box when thinking about the process of building up your chatbots, and start with the simplest solution and scale up. So Sean's got a question. How is CSAT affected in journeys that are uniquely handled by chatbots versus human counterparts? Does it go down because you lose the human touch, or does it increase due to speed of resolution? Masood, I'm not sure if you have an answer to this one.
Yeah, I will certainly have an attempt at answering this. I think the scope is, look, I think the picture is twofold, right? One is that if it's obvious and clear that a chatbot is answering, you've already kind of set some sort of an expectation. And we hope that you've set some sort of an expectation. And I think the idea of, a job description clearly defined definitely gives that impression of what the customer can accept. But when you bring in the human, I think the picture definitely is a little bit more complex because when you get that feedback, how clear are we at actually collecting the feedback? Was it for the bot? Was it for the human? Was it for the entirety of the interaction? And it's quite a difficult, I think, situation that needs to be thought out clearly.
Brilliant, thank you. So Neris has got another tip. Be explicit with your customers that they are speaking to a bot and give the bot a personality. If the customer is unknowingly speaking to a bot, they feel a bit duped. Neil, I know this is very much what you're going to be talking through. So I think it's probably time to go on to our poll just before your presentation. Which is, when will the robots take over customer service? They already have in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or never. So I'll just put the poll up. So Neil, what are your thoughts?
Hopefully never. I think never. I don't think robots will ever take over customer service, and we won't need human beings, because the complex human nature of what we deal with in customer service is always going to be human at one level. But I'll stop there because it starts getting a bit philosophical beyond that.
Yeah, 61% of you, 61% agree with you. 21% say 5 years, 10% say 10 plus years, 6% say 1 year, and 2% very sadly saying they already have. So I think probably it's time to hand over the presenting baton to you, Neil, to share your thoughts.
Okay, great, thank you.
Fab.
Okay, great stuff. Well, what I'd like to talk to you today, guys, about is to pose this question first of all, which is, can you make a chatbot sound real, not robo? And it is a question. I've got my thoughts on it, but I think this is going to be a kind of evolving question as the technology and our expectations change. Before I say more, I'd like us to do another poll if that's possible. So Rachel, if you could put this one up as well, please. I'd really be interested to hear your thoughts on this one.
So I'll just launch this one. So it's what is most important for making a great chatbot? Speed, knowledge, availability, or tone? Now, Neil, I don't know whether you want to say what you're hoping to see.
I'll leave that for the moment. I don't want to sort of influence it. I guess what I'm the question is most important. I mean, all of these are important, right? You know, you can't not have one of these, but I'd be interested to see what people say as the most important thing.
So I will close and share the results. So 73% saying knowledge, 14% of people saying availability, 9% saying tone, and 5% saying speed. Was that what you were hoping for?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't really I was just genuinely interested to see what people were going to say. If I'm honest, I hope that they wouldn't say what I was going to say, and that has happened. So I want to give you an alternative position on this, really. Because for me, so speed, knowledge, availability, and tone. So I see that the polls suggest that people out there think knowledge is the most important factor, and I can see why. But for me, these things aren't the most important. If we're talking about, I didn't really define what kind of chatbot we were talking about. If we're talking about a chatbot that interacts directly with people, for me, speed, knowledge, and availability is the baseline. The technology is out there at the moment for all of these things to be brilliant. So I think that is the least you can expect a chatbot to do. If we're actually going to talk about chatbots interacting with customers, which they're already doing, what really differentiates one is humanity, or the feeling that you're talking to a human. And as Neris said earlier, made the point that that's not that we're being duped or that we think we're really talking to a human, it's the feeling that we are. Because ultimately, that's what chatbots are doing when they're interacting directly with customers. They're giving us the feel that we are interacting with a real person. Otherwise, we wouldn't be inventing them. We wouldn't be looking into the possibility. And when we think about how we express humanity, the only way that your chatbot, when it's interacting directly with the customer, so not an agent assist, the only way it can show that it is like a human is through its tone. Because with most chatbots, we might see a picture of their face, we might see some other little icon, but primarily the way that you express a chatbot's humanity is through language and the tone they use. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So perhaps a controversial opinion, but go with it. I'll explain a bit more as we go through. Just to sort of preface what I'm going to talk about, if people haven't seen this already, it's a really interesting report I read recently by PricewaterhouseCoopers, which is called Experience is Everything. And in that, they've found what might seem like quite a familiar statistic, but it's this: 59% of customers globally feel brands are so myopic about automation they've lost touch with the human element of creating a great customer experience. And so I guess what that says is that from a customer's perspective, brands are so obsessed with creating things like chatbots that they're forgetting what's really important, which is customer experience. And again, another perhaps familiar statistic: 60% of customers say they'll drop a brand, even one they love, after just a few subpar experiences. And I know that one of the tips you shared, Rachel, from one of the audience today, and I'm sorry, I forgot who it was a really good one. It's don't start outside the box. You know, start with a simple solution and work up, and that way you're not risking giving people these subpar experiences, these inhuman, ineffective experiences, which will make them drop off and basically leave your brand. So do have a look at that report when you get a chance.
Yeah, we've
just
shared
before
it.
Brilliant, thank you, Rachel. Excellent. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff in there. Just before I talk more about language, I'm just going to take a very sort of high-level view about deciding whether or not you should use a chatbot, and if you are going to use it, what kind of chatbot. And I call this the bot decision. It's a really simple acronym to remember it. And the first big question I'd ask, and Mashoud's touched on this already, is the question easy to answer? Is it a repeatable question? Is it something that comes into your contact center, loads, and the answer doesn't really vary? Secondly, is it outsourceable? So in other circumstances, would you outsource this kind of question or inquiry to a third party? Because that's effectively what you're doing with a chatbot. And thirdly, again, Rashid's already talked about this, is it transferable? Is there a clear point when you can transfer to a human? And that's one of the reasons I love that idea of a job description, because just like with human beings who you employ, there is a point of, say, escalation where they stop dealing with it and someone else picks it up. But that point's got to be really, really clear before you decide to give your chatbot that responsibility. So some big questions, and don't really have time to go into much more detail today on those, but I think they're a good place to start if you are thinking about creating a chatbot. What I really want to talk to you today about is conversation design, because as I said earlier, the way to make a chatbot that interacts with your customers human is through tone and the way it has a conversation. It's not knowledge, it's not what you say. Those things are really, really important, of course, but chatbots can do those things. To really, really stand out, you need to look at the conversation. Before I give you these tips, if you're starting to think about, if you've defined what your chatbot can do, or you're close to knowing what they can do, and you're thinking about putting together a script, you've probably already got a lot of helpful tips for this in your tone of voice guidelines. And we've got some of the tone of voice guidelines that we've created for our clients here. And what these will do is help to define the way your chatbot could speak. You might decide that your chatbot needs to sound a little bit different to your sort of overall brand. It might have its own character, but this is a really good place to start, because these guides are full of practical tips for language, and they will help to shape the way that your chatbot speaks to your customers. So in terms of specific tips, this one, the audience in the chat room has already said this. Let your customers know they're talking to a chatbot. That is the first thing we need to know. We're happy to chat with a chatbot, and we're happy for it to feel human, but we need to know that that's what we're doing. So for example, here's Plum. Says, good morning, Neil. I'm Plum and I'm a robot. So in the second line, we know we're talking to a robot, but this robot sounds human. I can help you automate your savings, get insights on your spending, and even start investing. So I'm not feeling duped, as Theyre said earlier. I know who I'm interacting with here. I'm interacting with a robot. Tip 2, and this is a bit like the job description tip, really. Give your chatbot a name. The name is the first thing that your customers will see about this chatbot, and we invest so much in a name. It gives us such a strong impression of the character of the person, or in this case, the chatbot that we're talking to. So I'll give you an example of that in a second. So it not only helps our customers, but when you're thinking about the character of your chatbot and how it can talk, if you start with a name, it will start to inform your decision about the kind of language that chatbot uses. It's just like a real person, like a character in a story. Their name really kind of relates to their character, their personality, and how they speak. So for example, just take a few moments. I want you to think of a chatbot that's called RX360.0. Not full of personality. You're probably not imagining, this character in front of you. It's very, very robotic, very mechanical. And now I want you to think of a chatbot called Ernest. And as soon as I said that word, Ernest, you probably had lots of different connotations of what this chatbot is like you would do with a person. So I just want you to think now about what connotations the name Ernest has for you. So Ernest is a real chatbot. You can go and say hello to Ernest. And one of the reasons, it's a financial chatbot. And one of the primary reasons it's called Ernest is because it sounds like the word earnest, which is a synonym for honest. And you can see the typeface here as well is quite traditional. It makes us feel like this is a trustworthy character that we're interacting with. So a lot of thought, I think, has gone into giving that chatbot that specific name. Tip 3, consider different bots for different chats. So if you're thinking, actually, I'd like my chatbot to do lots of different interactions, but if we were asking real people to do this, we'd probably get 2 types of people. We can do the same with your chatbots, and I'll give you some examples here. So here's a chatbot called Maya, and Maya is a chatbot for Lemonade Insurance. Morning, Neil. I'm Maya. Let's get you some great insurance. This will only take a minute. To start, I'll need your home address. Again, so we know that this is a robot that we're talking to. And Maya deals with everyday queries. Lemonade also has a different kind of chatbot which deals with more sensitive issues. And they don't call it this to the customers, but this is how they framed it. This is Jim, and Jim is a more empathetic bot. So different name, different character, and you'll see the language is different as well. Great to meet you, John. I'll help you to get this claim sorted out in no time. Is this an emergency that requires a team to come over right now to stop further damage? So it's a little bit more serious and deals with different issues. My opinion with this bot is that it's really, really important that if something does get very, very serious, that there's a clear point where this chatbot hands over, transfers to a real human being. Tip number 4, remember that this is a chat. So every single word and every single sentence and phrase that this chatbot utters needs to sound chatty. So forget all of that formal business language, forget jargon, forget all that legalese. It has to sound chatty. As soon as it doesn't, it stops being a chat, and the whole of experience of interacting with your chatbot kind of drops away. And we remember suddenly that we're actually just interacting with a machine, and quite a business-like one. For example, again, another financial chatbot here. How much should I spend on restaurants in September? Chatbot says notification of payments total 14932 debited, etc. See transactions. It's a very, very functional, transactional, robotic message. The language does nothing here to make us feel like we're interacting with a human. But if we change it just slightly by adding a few conversational, chatty phrases, it makes all the difference, and suddenly we feel like we are chatting to a human. So let's see. You spent 149 in total between this date and this date. Want to see the transactions? Suddenly, this sounds like a real conversation. It sounds like what someone would say to us. And it's these 2 key phrases that do it. So the first one, let's see, that does not tell it, that does not give us any information. So I mean, some people might say, well, why bother saying that? It doesn't tell the customer anything. What it does is it helps it to feel like a human interaction. And rather than a statement, simply see transactions, we've got a very conversational way of writing a question. It doesn't say, do you want? It says, want to see the transactions, which is what we would say. So again here, we don't have a picture, we just have the language to help us feel that we are speaking, interacting with a human being. I'm going to give you another tip now, and I just want you to try this before I reveal what it is. And wherever you're sitting watching this webinar, I want you to read this sentence out. And I'm going to do it as well. And when you read it out, I want you to try and read it word for word what is on the screen. So I'm going to do it now. Don't worry if people give you strange looks. I'll explain it in a second. I am sorry you're having trouble topping up. I can see how frustrating that has been for you. I will find out what is happening. What is your mobile number, please? So you could probably hear as I read it out, and if you read it out as well, that it's quite stilted. And even though the words themselves are quite conversational, it's quite difficult to read out loud because it's missing something crucial. And I'll reveal what that is, and you've probably guessed. It's these things, contractions. So rather than I am, we're saying I'm. Rather than you are, we're saying you're. So I'll read that out again, and you'll hear how much more natural it sounds. I'm sorry you're having trouble topping up. I can see how frustrating that's been for you. I'll find out what's happening. What's your mobile number, please? So just by simply adding contractions in there, we make this much more natural and easy to read. And again, that feels like a real conversation rather than a stilted kind of mechanical robot. And there they are here. The other important thing when it comes to tone is to keep it consistent. So we've got an example here again from the Plum chatbot, and just have a quick read through. Read it out loud again. It'll help you to hear the tone, and try and see if you can spot where the tone changes. I'll read it out. You can withdraw whenever you like, or even start investing. I'm completely free until you decide to invest. Please note capital investors is at risk. Plumtastic, let's do this. Tap the button below to complete your sign up. You probably heard when the tone changed as I read it out, and it's a bit like that, those T&Cs on the end of a radio advert. It was this. So we've got chatty and upbeat on the left-hand side. So we've just pulled out this example. Plumtastic, let's do this, and a rainbow emoji, versus the very formal legalese on the right-hand side. Please note, capital invested is at risk. So it's true that this bot will have to tell you this like an advert would, but it doesn't have to use this language. And as soon as the tone changes, we lose trust in it because we feel like we're talking to someone different. We've gone from someone friendly and helpful and upbeat and chatty to suddenly this this very serious, formal lawyer voice, which makes us feel kind of scared. So, as I say, it undermines our trust, and it reminds us again that we are talking to a robot. My final tip when you're thinking about scripting a chatbot is be very careful with humor. And you'll see a lot of self-service chatbots out there that do use a lot of humor. But if we're talking about it in the contact center, just like when you're giving advice to your agents about when to add a light touch and when not to, we've got to be really, really careful, because the main thing is that we want our customers to know that we really care about them, we're interested in helping them. We never want to come across as flippant or uncaring or insensitive. So here's quite a famous bot, and it's a weather bot, but even something as innocuous as just asking about the weather could annoy someone if they don't get the joke or if they don't find it too funny. So as you read through this one, you'll see what I mean. So this is someone trying to find out what the weather's like in Brooklyn. Says this weekend at the bottom. The bot says, "Excusez-moi," and they say weekend in capital letters, and it says, "Sorry, dozed off for a second. What were you saying?" So that might be funny for a weather bot, but you can imagine that if your customers are have a complaint or a query and your bot adds this kind of humor, they're going to get really, really annoyed. Here's another example of a bot that uses humor, and I think it's a financial bot here. With Clio, you can ask Clio to roast me, as it says here. So you do have to opt in to get this kind of humor. And this is the message that you might get back. So, okay, now I'm literally just going to make you stare at how much money you've spent in the last 2 months, £9,882. And it says you're free now, by the way. So again, this is Clio have done this deliberately as an opt-in. It's part of their brand. It's adding a bit of light-hearted humor. But if this is one of your customers, particularly someone in a vulnerable situation, you wouldn't want to be talking to them like this. So I would say steer clear of this kind of humor. So just a quick summary then before I wrap up. Number one, let your customer know they're talking to a chatbot. I think most of us are happy to do that as long as we don't feel like we're being duped. Number two, give your chatbot a name. When it comes to the conversation design and the scripting of your chatbot, it'll help you to think of it as a real person. And so you can ask yourself, what would Ernest say, for example? consider different chat bots for different chats. So if you're asking your bots to do kind of different things, try not to make them do everything. Think about what type of character would help in what type of situation. Number 4, remember it's a chat, so make sure it always sounds chatty and conversational. Be careful with humor, and for those of you guys who have seen these webinars before, do the real or robot test. And if you haven't seen me do that before and you're intrigued, do drop me a line. I'll be happy to tell you what the real or robot test is. Haven't got time to share it today. There's some more tips on thefirstword.co.uk. We've got a blog about this with some more tips about how to write for chatbots. Last words for me, and I think the big thing for me is, if you are thinking about creating a chatbot, make sure that your investment is worthwhile and it adds to the customer's experience, and that you don't sacrifice that experience just for the sake of efficiency. So thank you very much, everyone. I've got my contact details on here if anyone's got any questions after today, and I'm leaving you with this message, which is to, whether you're using a chatbot or not, is to stay human in all of those interactions. So thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Neil, for that. So there's been lots going on in the chat room. You'll be pleased to know, lots of questions coming through.
Great.
So Dale's actually asked I think it's Mashoud, one thing I took away from the agent assist was, how would you know when the bot ends and the agent begins, and vice versa? So Mashoud, do you have an answer?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think firstly, I mean, I can't really speak for how some of the maybe other vendors are solving it, but one thing I can say, within Puzzle and within the innovation team, certainly we looked at some of these challenges when we started on this journey. And for us, because everything is offered from the same platform, if you like. So within Puzzle, and I pointed out on the picture, these different frameworks, we kind of keep track of, when the session is actually being handed over. And within the customer view, you definitely have the option there to make distinctions on when the conversation is happening, let's say with Ernest, for example, and you're now being handed over to somebody else. So I think, when you've got a name, for example, switch the name, be visual about the fact that it's happening, have a placeholder message if they're going to have to wait 1 or 2 seconds as the transition happens. So I think visual cue is the one thing, and of course behind it metrics, etc. And very important, I think, to draw the separation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So Neris has asked Neil, do you think bots should personalize, or is that creepy? You can withdraw whenever you like, Mr. Martin.
That is quite a creepy message, Neris. Good example. Yeah, I'm going to assume, Neris, that what you mean is personalize, is that as in use my name. Apologies if that's not what you mean. So maybe clarify that in the chat room if it isn't. Yes, I think so, because I think if people know that they're speaking to a chatbot, you've kind of crossed that line, you then expect a human an interaction that feels human. So, and that includes personalization. I think it becomes creepy if the chatbot calls you by name and that takes you by surprise, like you haven't given your name at that point, it's just found it somewhere else. I think that would be creepy. But if you log on and you've typed your name in and it uses your name back to you, I think treat it like an email or a live chat from one of your agents. I think it's a good way to make it feel human.
Yeah, Neris has just confirmed in the chat room that was what she meant. So thank you very much.
Good, okay.
So Paddy sent an opinion saying machine learning, which determines how a chatbot handles voice and text, depends hugely on data to continuously improve. Your chatbot data is very valuable. Make sure you have a plan to gather, store and continue using it for many years to come. So Neris has sent in another tip saying your agents will inevitably have to pick up conversations that the bot doesn't contain. Make sure that you have a solution in place which allows the transcription of the chat to be transferred over to the agent in real time. Omnichannel. Mashoud, I know that you mentioned Omnichannel at the start. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely, and this is absolutely a critical point to give the context of the entirety of the conversation. In fact, when this transition happens, and somebody I think earlier suggested to almost try to do it, ahead of the agent receiving the conversation, so that there isn't a gap in agent trying to refer to something. So absolutely, very, very valid input, and something that, as I say, within the solutions we put together, tried to accommodate a lot of this. Yeah, and so very much nice to see that we're on the same page.
Brilliant. So we've had a question in saying, how long would it take for these chatbots to be rolled out to contact centres on a global basis? Mashoud, I don't know whether you want to answer this sort of question.
Well, if I understand the question to mean sort of, physical deployments, I think it's one very small part. The physical pressing of a button is but one part. It's the prerequisites. It's really the gathering of information to scope down exactly what it is you're going to be answering. And behind it, there's a bunch of work in reality, at least today, that needs to be done. And that's very manual, in fact. So training of chatbots is very much manual. So depending on the task that you are actually taking upon yourself to allow a chatbot to do, and Neil, I think you mentioned as well, to identify very clearly, is it something that's transferable? For example, if you have a very good scope, then of course it will entirely be dependent on that. And the training part right now, as we speak, much of it today, unfortunately, is still a very manual process. So.
Okay, thank you. So Alex has got an opinion saying, if somebody wants to know what time their order is arriving, I would suggest they would prefer a fast, correct response with robotic tone than a wonderful, rich reply, which was wrong. Neil, you're agreeing?
Yeah. I partly agree with that. I think what people would prefer is a fast human response. I don't think you need to say lots of things to reply quickly in a human way. It doesn't need to be rich and florid. It's just like a human being responding to something really, really quickly. But I take the point is that if you want something quickly, you want it to be correct. You don't, whether it's a chatbot or a human being, I don't think we want something that's wrong.
No. So Sean's sent in a tip saying, are there opportunities to have a chatbot that resolves colleague-facing issues? For example, can we put a chatbot in place that will help colleagues with holiday requests and shift patterns? Should we leave those to internal teams? Actually, this is a question. So Mashoud, I don't know whether you have any thoughts on this one.
Well, I think if we look at it in a maybe slightly different way, and that is when we talk about internal chatbots, essentially, a lot of what we talked about earlier on in sort of getting everything right, you probably can be a little bit sloppy, if you don't mind me saying. But I think it's especially true that when something is sort of out there, in the wild, facing customers or dealing with customers, but when it comes to sort of internal for colleagues, and you set that job description we talked about earlier on quite clearly on what its capabilities are, I think pretty much any task that is sort of FAQ type can be in fact made available. And in the case of shift requesting things, perhaps that's something that's automated in the back end, and it really is a process where you bring up all of this, let's say, actions that typically would be done by a human being, and just make it available in one place. So I think there's a little bit of flexibility here, and that, but certainly is a good use case with chatbots to have it as an internal system.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And unfortunately, we've reached the top of the hour. So I'd just like to say in one or two words, what did you like best about today's webinar? If you could leave that in the chat room. Today's winning tip is from Daniel, who said, allow agents to train and improve chatbots before releasing them into the wild. So we'll be in contact later on. Just a reminder that we do have a survey for you to fill, so please let us know your thoughts on our webinars. We have taken a recording. This will be available later on this afternoon, And just a reminder that we are back in an hour's time at 3 o'clock for the Secrets of WFM. And I'd just like to say thank you very much to our two brilliant speakers today, to Neil Martin from The First Word. Thank you very much.
Right, you're welcome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And to Mashoud Ahmed from Puzzle, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure being here. Thank you.
Brilliant. So I'll see everyone in an hour's time. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.